Good morning, everybody. So, some big news today. Blizzard has announced the nerfs that are going to happen to Classic and Standard cards. I woke up this morning and I looked at the news and I was like, oh my god. Because I wanted to record this video this morning, but I want to record that one too, so I'm probably going to end up recording it in the same breath as I record this one. But, alright, so for now, let's just focus on the new stuff, shall we? So this is part 3 of our Whispers of the Old Gods review. And let's get right into it. Alright, here we go. First card, Wisps of the Old Gods. 7 mana, choose 1. Either summon 7 1/1 Wisps or give your minions +2/+2. So, of course, this is comparable to Dark Whispers, which was a card that came out, which was a previous card that basically does the same thing except a little bit cheaper. 5 mana, 5 1/1s, or give a minion +5/+5. Now, this one can work kind of like a Bloodlust in that it can give all of your minions +2/+2, which is, not bad, but for 7 mana, it's a little bit overcosted, right? And the 7 1/1 Wisps, I mean, yeah, it's 7 minions, kind of. It has synergy with Savage Roar, but none of those Wisps have charge, right? So, yeah, this card is just disgustingly terrible, and it will never see play. It won't see play in Standard, it won't see play in Wild, and it won't see play in Arena. I don't think. It's just not good enough. Okay, the next Druid card is the 4 mana 3/3 Meijer Keeper. So you can choose one, summon a 2/2 slime, or gain an empty mana crystal. So notably, this is another way to ramp Druid. And I think that actually this card is a little bit underrated by some of my colleagues in the Hearthstone world. So if you choose the 2/2 slime, you're getting a 4 mana 5/5, which is not bad at all, right? I mean, if you compare it to like Chillwind Yeti, which is almost competitively viable, right? You're getting a 4 mana 4/5. In this case, you're getting a 4 mana 5/5 with 1 attack, so it has a lot higher chance of actually trading up with something like a Sludge Belcher on 5. You can kill it off. It's not ideal to kill it off like that, right? But, I mean, you could technically trade into it with both parts of this card and be a little bit happy. But, I mean, the biggest thing is actually the ramp. I mean, I can't believe that no one has considered the fact that in Standard, right, Emperor Thaurissan is still a thing. So, being able to play this on 4 with Emperor Thaurissan in your hand and ramp yourself up so that the next turn, on turn 5, you can play Emperor Thaurissan. That's pretty strong, right? And you can reduce the rest of the cards in your hand. Or you can play any 6-drop, really, for that matter, right? And, I mean, this doesn't have to be played on that mana either. I mean, you can play this on... You can be happy to play this on turn 6 with a 2-drop or Hero Power and gain that mana crystal. And then on turn 7, then you drop something like an 8-cost minion, like an Ironbark Protector or something like that. Or you play it on 5, and then on turn 6, you drop Ancient of War. Yeah, I don't think Ironbark Protector is going to see much play, but I mean in Arena, right? In Arena, that would be a possible thing to do. So yeah, in Arena, this card is ridiculous, right? The value is insane. And I think that even in mid-range decks and Constructed, especially knowing what I know now, which I promise not to talk about in this video, about the nerfs to the Druid, I think that this card is going to see a lot of play in mid-range Druid Constructed decks as well. Especially since, spoiler alert, they can't really run combo anymore. Okay, so Hunter card, 8 mana, Call of the Wild. Summon all 3 animal companions, so notably Kripparrian has called this the best card in the expansion. I don't think it's quite the best card in the expansion, but it's ridiculous. So if you consider Animal Companion is 3 mana, summon one of the Animal Companions. Of course, the Animal Companions are Misha, the bear, the 4/4 taunt, Huffer, which it's always Huffer, right? The 4/2 charger. And then Leok, which is the 2/4 essentially raid leader, which gives all of your minions +1 attack, right? So being able to summon all 3 of those at once is pretty ridiculous, especially when you consider the fact that the beast synergy between them is a thing, right? So Leok is immediately going to buff the attack of Huffer, which is a charge minion, allowing you to immediately do 5 damage to the face. It's also going to buff Misha to a 5 attack taunt minion, which is not nothing, right? 5 attack taunt is pretty insane. And of course, it also just exists as a 2/4 by itself. But even if you just consider the value of each of these cards individually, they're worth more than 3 mana. So even if they were 3 mana each of the 3 animal companions, you're getting 9 mana of stats for 8 mana, which is really good. But if you actually consider the fact that the minions are actually worth about 3.5 mana, if you compare, for example, Misha to another 3 mana taunter like Ironfur Grizzly, it actually has +1/+1 over Ironfur Grizzly. And if you consider Huffer as a 3 mana charger, you'd have to compare it to what's the name of it? You'd have to compare it to Wolf Rider, which is a 3/1. This is a 4/2, so it's a little bit better than Wolf Rider. And if you consider Leok compared to Raid Leader, it's not even a comparison, right? Raid Leader is a 2/2, it's just terrible. And Leok just beats it by +2 health, right? So these cards are actually worth 3.5, maybe even 4 mana each. So it's possible that you're getting up to like 12 mana in value for 8 when you play it, plus an immediate 5 damage charge to the face. And if you happen to get Thorson discounts and buffs on Huffer and all that, I mean, this can actually just be a powerful finisher just by itself. So this card's really ridiculous. I think it's going to make it into definitely all mid-range decks. Maybe we're going to see some kind of Control Hunter pop up finally. I mean, we've seen a lot of the tools for it kind of emerging over the last couple of expansions. It hasn't really become a thing yet, but maybe someone will figure out something that they can do. Maybe I'll tool around with it. I don't usually play Hunter, but this card's really good, and I'm actually excited to try it out. Yeah, in Arena, yeah, hell yeah. Pick this every time. This is way, 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 way better than anything else you're going to get on 8. So the new Mage card, Kabbalah's Tome, add 3 random Mage spells to your hand. So of course you're thinking like, okay, well this is decent for Tempo Mage. It allows you to keep going, gives you more things to activate your Flame Waker, things like that. I'm not all that excited about it though. If you consider the fact of how anti-tempo this card is, the fact that Tempo Mage is called Tempo Mage, it's not very good, right? Possibly see play in some kind of a fatigue deck, but I still think you'd be much, much more excited to play the Ethereal Conjurer over this card. Not only do you get a choice of between 3 spells, you also get a 6/3 body, and that 6 damage is incredibly threatening to certain board states. And I think that the 6/3 body is perhaps worth more than 2 random spells, especially given the fact that you can choose the spell you pick, whereas Kabbalah's Tome, you could just get 3 random secrets that are useless. And you don't want to paste 9 mana to play 3 random useless secrets like Spellbender, Counterspell, blah blah blah, right? Especially if you're going up against a class that doesn't play a lot of spells. But yeah, so I wouldn't be really all that excited about this card. It's like, it's too expensive. Yeah, it's 5 mana, draw 3, but the draw 3 isn't really that great. I mean, sure, Mage has a lot of really good spells like Fireball, and again, spoiler alert, none of those got nerfed. Fireball, Frostbolt, things like that. The Alexstrasza nerf didn't happen either, so that's a thing, but I don't think you would run this in Freeze Mage. I don't think you would run this just hoping to get burn off of it. No. I think you would run Ethereal Conjurer before you would ever run this kind of a card. So overall, I think that in Constructed it won't see a lot of play, both in Wild and in Standard. And in Arena, it's not bad. It's not great, but it's average, and I think you would probably pick it over Trash. So yeah, it's a thing. 5 mana draw 3 is not terrible, especially if you have synergy with it, like Mana Worm or Flame Waker. You'd probably pick it up. Okay, so this is an interesting one. So the Paladin 1/3, it's got the stat line of Sir Finley Murgleton, so already a really good 1-drop. Vilefin Inquisitor, so Battlecry, your hero power becomes summon a 1/1 Murloc. Now, notably, this doesn't work with Justicar, so if you happen to Justicar yourself, you're upgrading your basic hero power, which would summon 2 1/1 Silverhand Recruits instead. And if you play this after you play Justicar, you're really sad because then your hero power becomes summon a 1/1 Murloc instead of summon 2 1/1s, and you've lost all that value. But this is going to be really, really useful for an aggro Paladin deck that wouldn't run Justicar, so that won't really be an issue, I think. And I think this is actually really good when you consider the fact that Murloc has a lot of synergy within its tribe, right? There's the Murloc War Leader, which can buff all of your other Murlocs. There's other Murlocs that can buff health and things like that. And remember that we haven't even seen all of the set yet, so it's quite possible that we will see some more Murloc synergy cards coming out, and it's possible that the whole Murloc aggro Paladin thing becomes a serious thing. I mean, this card is pretty good if you're running a Murloc deck. If you're not running a Murloc deck, you would never run this card, right? But I think that in that specific deck, this is actually a pretty good card. The only issue that I really see with this kind of thing is the kind of Murloc deck that Paladins run right now is more of a combo burst deck. So, and that's not going to be possible anymore because in Standard, right, the old Murkai is actually being rotated out, along with all of those other unique cards that you have to get from special situations like attending BlizzCon, or in that case it was owning every Murloc. All of those kind of cards are being rotated out, so therefore a Murloc deck is less good. So it'll be interesting to see if Blizzard actually addresses that somehow, either with introducing more Murlocs in the expansion or something like that. But right now it doesn't seem like they're doing that, so I'm not sure how good this card is going to be or how viable a Murloc aggro Paladin is going to be. But I like that they're not giving up on the Murlocs. I think that Murloc does have a chance to become a thing, but it just hasn't happened yet. So I'll be interested to see what comes out in this expansion to kind of back up this card, if anything. So yeah, right now as it stands though, in Constructed, yeah, it's going to be used in that specific deck if that deck is a thing. Otherwise, it's not going to be used at all. And in Arena, yeah, it's a good one drop, and you'd probably pick it up as long as you don't have something like Justicar already drafted. So yeah, it's not bad. 1/3, 1 mana 1/3 is really not bad. Essentially, the whole Silverhand Recruit versus Murloc thing is only a problem if you happen to draft a Quartermaster, which is also an epic, so it's equally unlikely as drafting a Vilefin Inquisitor. So meh, it's not really going to be an issue. And I think you would actually pick this up pretty highly simply due to the fact that it makes picking Murlocs simply better. And you do tend to see a lot of Murlocs in your choices when you're drafting an Arena deck. So yeah, I think you would probably pick this up, and then you'd be happy to pick up other things like, well, again, you probably won't pick up War Leader, but you might pick up some other Murloc synergy cards along the way, and then you're pretty happy. Oh, another point that I just completely, for some reason overlooked was the fact that that Murloc Knight is a thing, right? So you can play your Murloc Knight and then summon your 1/1 Murloc and then spawn a Murloc that buffs your 1/1 Murloc like a War Leader, right? So that's a total thing that's possible, and I completely overlooked that. But yeah, so, that's pretty good too, but I don't think that you would run this in a mid-range deck simply because of that. But I definitely think that you would run Murloc Knight in an aggro deck. Definitely. Okay, Rogue, 6 mana, Thistle Tea, draw a card and add 2 copies of it to your hand. Yeah, so I'm a little bit torn about this one. So, of course, it's essentially 6 mana, draw 3, but those 3 cards could be anything in your deck, right? A lot of Rogue decks run a lot of situationally useful cards, like Preparation, and I don't think you'd be happy to draw 3 Preparations in your hand. And you probably wouldn't be, you would probably be extremely happy to draw, for example, like 3 Blade Flurries. Or if you're running Cthulhu and you happen to just play this and luckily draw Cthulhu off the top of your deck and you have 3 copies of your buffed Cthulhu in your hand, you're extremely happy. And not only are you extremely happy, but you probably just won the game as well over the course of 3 turns, or maybe even less than that. But I think that in most situations, the card, the 6 mana draw 3 is not going to be good enough to be played over Sprint. And I think that in Rogue decks as they stand right now, you would have to choose one or the other. I don't think that Rogue decks can be that anti-tempo enough to play all of it. So you'd have to pick either Sprint or Thistle Tea, or you could do 1 and 1. but I think ultimately you would have to make a decision like that, and I don't think you would play Thistletea over Sprint, simply due to the fact that the RNG involved can completely screw you over. Like, you could draw 2-3 backstabs, and that's pretty bad in the late game. So, notably, this is not an early game card, right? This is 6 mana. It's like Sprint. So, at best, you can play it at 3 mana when you preparation, but overall, you're going to be looking to play this in the late game at 6 mana, right? And it's not good enough for that specific situation, because Rogue has a lot of potential dead draws. You could draw a backstab with no synergy, and you have 3 copies of it, and your opponent is warrior, and they've damaged all their minions already with a whirlwind, and now you're screwed completely, right? They're patron warrior or something like that. But so I don't think that this card is all that great, simply due to the RNG involved. I think you would play Sprint all day over this card. And so it's too bad, considering how Thistletea is such a staple to the Rogue in World of Warcraft, but it's alright. We still have Sprint, so I'm not too mad about that. So yeah, in Arena, definitely, I think you would pick this card simply because of the maximum value generated, but in Constructed, it's just too bad. Okay, so this is the new Shaman weapon. So 5 mana, Hammer of Twilight. So Death Rattle, summon a 4/2 elemental. So this has been compared a lot to True Silver, which I think is a fair comparison. Both are 4/2. Now this does cost 1 more mana, but the Death Rattle is insane, right? Essentially this is 5 mana, deal 12. Which is pretty ridiculous, and I don't even really need to talk about how good this card is. Everyone has seen how good True Silver Champion has been for Paladin, but yeah, this doesn't have the healing, but it kind of deals 4 more damage, so it's pretty good, right? I mean, if it gets Harrison, you still get that 4/2 elemental. That's pretty good. Yeah, definitely gonna run this in mid-range. Definitely. Yeah, you might even run this in face. Yeah, you just might. It's that good. It's pretty good. So definitely gonna pick this one up. For all of you Shamans, should be really excited about this one. So yeah, in Constructed, no question. All decks. Just play it. Just play it in the decks, especially mid-range. So if mid-range becomes a thing, definitely playing this card. In Arena, you're gonna pick this all day as well. It's too bad it's an epic. Alright, the 6 mana Thing from Below, another Shaman card. So this is a taunt that costs 1 less for each totem you've summoned this game. Now, notably, that includes totems that you're playing with your hero power, and totems that you're playing from your hand, like Totem Golem and Mana Tide, things like that. Of course, Flame Tongue. So, I mean, how realistically, in a game of mid-range, I think you can kind of expect this to cost 3 or 4. You're probably gonna... At some point, you're going to press the button between turns 1 and 6. And I think that you're also very likely to play Totem Golem on 2, possibly even play 2 Totem Golems, just because of how ridiculous that card is. You're also quite likely to have Flame Tongue. So I think that on average, you can expect this card to be discounted by a couple. So you can, if you're going to expect to be playing this in the mid game, you can expect this to cost 3 or 4 mana, and you're getting a 5/5 taunter out of it, which is really good. It's going to stop a lot of the damage coming in from your opponent, and it has 5 attack, which is insane for a taunt, right? Notably, a lot of the taunts that we have now have about 3 attack, 3 or 4, at the same kind of a mana cost. So, I mean, this is a pretty good card in the fact that we can discount it and get it to cost, like, for example, 4. This goes up against Senjin. Not only does this kill Senjin, it survives, so it's just strictly better. So I'm really excited about this one. I think that all mid-range decks are going to play this, and I think it's one of the... So I mentioned in the last video how we needed to see more tools from this expansion to see mid-range Shaman become a thing. I think this is one of the cards that enables that deck to become a thing. So I think that in both forms of Constructed, you would pick this card extremely highly. And in Arena, just based on how I've seen Shaman Arena players playing, I think you would pick this card as well, simply because you press the button a lot. And you wouldn't be sad to draw this card in the late game and play it for nothing along with your Kraken or something like that. Alright, so the next Shaman card is the 4 mana Master of Evolution, so it's a 4/5 that transforms a friendly minion into a random one that costs 1 more. Now, this is another mid-range tool that is going to basically explode the mid-range Shaman into a huge thing, I think. So the ability to damage your minion, almost kill it off, possibly trading up for another minion, and then play Master of Evolution and changing it, not only restoring all of its health, but transforming it into a minion that costs 1 more is pretty crazy. Now, notably, we do have some pretty bad minions that you could turn it into. So, for example, if you play this on a 3-drop, you have a chance of getting the Faceless Shambler, which would be a 1/1/4 drop, and you would be extremely sad about that. But, you know, that's variance. This is Hearthstone. You can't control every variable, right? On average, this is going to be better. You're going to get a better statted minion than what you had, plus you got the value out of your minion by trading it into something else, hopefully, before you play this card. I don't think you would want to take the risk of playing this card on an undamaged minion, but I think that if you can trade this and trade your minion into something, damage it off, damage it a little bit, and then kind of use this card to upgrade it and heal it, that's insane value. So this is an amazing card. Again, in all forms of Constructed, you're going to pick this all day. You're also going to pick this all day in Arena. Great card. Great card. Alright, Warlock, 3 mana, Spreading Madness, so deal 9 damage, randomly split among all characters, so this is friendly fire and intended fire. So, you know, I mean, this is better. This card is immediately better if you have no board. And then you're pretty much, on average, dealing probably like 6 or 7 damage to your opponent's minions or face. And that's pretty good. I mean, you know, Warlock is notably losing Dark Bomb, which was a way to kind of kill off minions. But Warlock also has a lot better removal just in the classic set already, right? We have Shadow Flame, which is an extremely efficient removal, and we have Hellfire, which is not the most efficient removal in the world, but it works really well in the decks that we want it to work in. So, you know, I'm not entirely sure if this card is gonna make it into those kind of decks. One of the things that I've been kind of concerned about is the loss of Dark Bomb due to Malygos Warlock being a thing. So I'm a little bit worried that deck is going to be killed off by the fact that that Dark Bomb is rotating out. Could this card possibly replace it? I think the fact that it costs 3 mana is a significant problem. It would mean that an Emperor Thaurissan discount would have to hit exactly Malygos and this card in order for that to work, because then this would cost 2 and then Malygos would cost 8, and then you'd be able to play these together. Now, that is also pretty crazy. So you would be able to do 14 damage split among all characters, but notably, you can hit your own Malygos and you can hit your own face as well, so it's not nearly as good. And so, because of the random nature of this card, I simply don't think that it's going to be good enough to see play. It's possible that this card would make it into a Reno deck simply as another way to control the board. It's possible that you would play this in some kind of a Warlock Cthulhu deck, which I imagine would be a heavy control deck, simply for the same reason. You want to keep the board clear so that you can drop Cthulhu on an empty board and essentially deal a lot of damage to your opponent's face. But again, we haven't seen any specific Cthulhu synergy cards for Warlock yet, so I'm not entirely sure how that's all going to play out. But yeah, as it is right now, I don't think that this card is going to beat out Hellfire or Shadow Flame, so meh. Basically just meh. The opportunities for friendly fire make this card too bad. Demons already have some kind of a downside that affects you when you play them. For example, you play Flame Imp, it does 3 damage to your face. You play this card, then you deal 3 damage to your face playing Flame Imp, and you lose the value because it kills off your Flame Imp, and you're really sad. Right? Just for an example, right? So I don't think that you're going to be very excited about picking another card that has significant downside. But yeah, you know, as I said, if your side of the board is empty, it's not terrible, but it's still going to hit your face a little bit, probably on average, so it's not great. I don't think that this card is really that good in Arena or even in Constructed. All right, so it's a 1 mana, essentially, 2/2 possessed villager. So it's a 1/1 with a death rattle to summon a 1/1 shadow beast, which is a neutral, as it's not a demon. So there's no demon synergy there or anything like that. So what do I think about this card? It's okay. If Zoo Warlock is still going to be a thing, I think that this card is a 1 mana 2/2. The stats are pretty good. I think you'd be pretty happy to pick up this card. We're going to be losing Haunted Creeper, so this is a decent way to kind of replace it. It has some synergy with Knife Juggler and things like that. So yeah, it's not terrible. I think that you would definitely play this in a Zoo deck. So in all forms of in all forms, no. I think in Wilds you probably wouldn't play this card simply because you don't want too many low cost minions. But I think that in the standard format where we're going to be losing some of our cards, I think that this might possibly make it in. It's a little bit above average on my rating, so. It's not terrible. I think that in Arena you would pick this card all day. It's a 1 mana kind of 2/2, and it's an early game card, and Arena's all about tempo. So yeah, I'm really excited about this one for Arena, but in Constructed, I'm not so sure. Alright, so the Warlock legendary for this expansion is Cho'Gall. So it's a 7 mana 7/7. So it's a War Golem, so it hopefully has a really good battle cry. So the battle cry is the next spell you cast this turn costs health instead of mana. Oh my god. So this card has the potential for some ridiculous swing turns, right? Notably, the spell has to be cast this turn. So you have to have a spell already in your hand when you play this card, right? You're not going to want to play Cho'Gall, a 7/7 body, and then play something like Twisting Nether. That's not the ideal, unless you're in such a desperate situation that you need to cast Twisting Nether on 7 mana instead of 8 mana. But most likely you can probably last the one more turn to cast it then. But where this is actually really ridiculous is if you consider things like, for example, Siphon Soul. So Siphon Soul is normally costs 6 mana to destroy a minion. In this case, you pay 6 health. So 6 health, you destroy a minion, you gain 3 of that health back through Siphon Soul's effect. So essentially, instead of costing 6 mana, you paid 3 health to destroy an enemy minion, which might be something like Ysera or something. So that makes Cho'Gall an absolutely insane late game card if you happen to run Siphon Soul in your deck. And I think that with this inclusion of Cho'Gall, people are definitely going to be running Siphon Soul in their deck. So, yeah, I'm really excited to see some cool things for this card. I think this card will definitely make it into the Reno control handlock. I'm not sure if it would be played elsewhere, but it's possible. Something big like, for example, a Cho'Gall Shadow Flame is also possible, paying 4 health to deal 7 damage to the board. I can't see the situation where you would have to do that, but it's possible, right? So there's a lot of possibilities with this card. It's pretty cool, and I think that it's going to see a lot of play and a lot of experimentation. But I'm pretty excited. I think it's actually going to turn out to be pretty good. I think that in Arena, it's completely dependent on how many spells you've drafted. I mean, you wouldn't be very excited to pick up a War Golem, but as we've talked about in the previous reviews, some legendaries are pretty bad in Arena, so you might pick this up simply as a 7 mana 7/7 over some trash legendaries. Okay, so remember in the last video where I talked about warriors are going to need a lot of whirlwind effects in order to keep viable? Well, look at this, 3 mana Ravaging Ghoul, so 3 mana 3/3. So already, not terrible, and the battle cry is deal 1 damage to all other minions, and notably, it doesn't hit itself. So that's really, really good. So now the combo is 8 mana Grim Patron. So you play Grim Patron, you play this. Hell, you might even run that tentacle card, the 1 mana tentacle card in your deck, possibly, just as another way to deal 1 damage. So yeah, Blizzard did it. They kept Warrior's theme alive, and notably with another new card that we're gonna see in a minute, which is a really, really good card. This card has insane synergy with that, so I am so excited for this. It keeps the mid-range Grim Patron dream alive. It enables Battle Rage, and it's a really, really awesome card. So yeah, Ravaging Ghoul, great card. Yeah, you're going to pick this in Constructed all day. In Arena, however, you might not want that friendly fire, so maybe you're not going to pick it so highly in Arena. But of course, in decks that are tailored around dealing damage to your own minions, this is the card that you want. And it's also going to deal damage to your opponent's minions, which is a good thing, usually. Okay, so this was the card that I alluded to. So this is one of the epic spells for Warrior. So 3 mana, Blood Warriors. Add a copy of each damaged friendly minion to your hand. Oh my god, Infinite Grim Patron. Right, so of course, you can use this notably with like Grommash or something like that and get another copy of Grom. That's crazy, but you can't do it on the same turn because it costs 3 mana, right? So yeah, I think that you will definitely run this card in your patron deck, in a deck that's built around dealing damage to your own minions, and you would be really, really happy to add a bunch of copies of Grim Patron to your hand and continue damaging them and generating more. I think that this is a card that pushes the mid-range patron, which was already competitively viable, into being a really good deck. Not insane, but an even better deck, in that you can simply, if your Grim Patrons survive a turn, you can simply copy them and generate an infinite number of Grim Patron turns, as long as you continue to have Whirlwind effects to copy them off. And the value that you can get off of that is pretty crazy. And not only that, but of course you can always do something like in a control deck, you could play like Yogg Sirhan. And if your opponent can't deal with it, you can trade it into something, get another copy of Yogg Sirhan, and then play it again on the next turn, and then you have 2 Yogg Sirhans. That's pretty insane, right? So you could even do something like play Elise Starseeker and then damage her, and then get copies of Elise and put multiple maps in your deck. There's a lot to prevent fatigue, right? There's a lot of different things that you could do with this card that I'm really excited to see. But of course, I think it's definitely going to make it into the patron deck. I'm not entirely sure if it's going to make it into control, because the control decks at this moment don't necessarily want to damage their own minions. But due to the fact that in control decks, controlling the board, of course, is the name of the deck, that your minions are going to get damaged naturally anyway, and perhaps spending 3 mana to generate a copy of a big minion is value enough. So, of course, Dr. Boom is rotating out of standard, but it was the example that came into my head, so let's just run with it for wild. So you play your Dr. Boom on 7, it survives somehow, and then you trade it into something, and then you pay 3 mana to get a copy of it. And then you can play it again on the next turn, which would at that point be turn 9. So turn 9 is a great turn to play Dr. Boom, right? You play Dr. Boom play Dr. Boom Hero Power or Dr. Boom 2-drop, Fiery Warwick, something like that. It's pretty good, right? Getting another Dr. Boom on the board. So if you can think of it in terms of simply the value it generates for 3 mana, it's pretty good. Of course, it's slow, but of course, a lot of warrior decks are designed to be a little bit slower, so it's not necessarily a huge downside for a warrior. So I'm excited to see what people can come up with this deck, or what I can come up with even. I'm going to be experimenting with this card for sure when it comes out in my warrior deck. I have a mid-range patron deck I run a lot, so I'm going to probably try to squeeze it in there. In Arena, yeah, I think that you would probably not necessarily want to pick this card up in Arena, simply because you can't guarantee that you're going to get the value out of it. If you happen to somehow draft Grim Patron and a bunch of Whirlwinds, you're going to pick this card all day if it happens to come up, right? But it's also an epic, so it's not going to come up that often. But I don't think you'd be too excited about 3 mana draw 1, essentially. And especially if your draw 1 is not a good card. So, meh, it's kind of meh for Arena. But in Constructed, really excited. Okay, so the 9 mana 9/9 Blood of the Ancient One. So if you control 2 of these, at the end of your turn, merge them into the Ancient One. So here is the Ancient One. So the Ancient One is a token, so it's a 9 mana 30/30, which of course is, not bad, not bad. It's pretty good, right? Dealing 30 damage is pretty good, but how likely are you to get 2 Blood of the Ancient Ones on the board? And the answer is not very likely. Even with Thorson discounts and things like that, it's incredibly unlikely that you would be able to get 2 Blood of the Ancient Ones on the board in the same turn. So that makes this card not too terrible. It means that your Blood of the Ancient One has to survive one turn, and you have to have another one in your hand. Or, notably, especially in a control deck like Priest, we've seen that Herald Village, the new Priest legendary, at least I think that was the name of it. Maybe I butchered that. Sorry, guys. The ability to make a 1/1 copy of all your minions that are on the board. So if this happens to survive, you kind of have two chances in a Priest deck to be able to copy this minion and play it again. And then you end your turn and you get the Ancient One. Now, notably, you can also trade the one you played the turn before. You can damage it a little bit, killing off one of your opponent's minions. And then they come together and they create this Ancient One Beast, which is a 9 mana 30/30. So even if it gets sapped, you can play it again for 9 mana on the next turn. So notably, this is an incredibly slow card that requires very, very specific cards to get going. And because of that, I think that it's a little bit unviable for Arena for Constructed, simply due to the fact that it's too slow. Yeah, in Arena, this card is terrible. It's a 9 mana 9/9, and it's not very good at all. You want your 9 mana cards to do something to the board or have some sort of beneficial effect, and this is not that. And there's almost no chance you're going to draft 2 of these in Arena. Although, if you happen to do it and you happen to live long enough to make this work, that's pretty good. I kind of compare this card to Rafam. And Rafam doesn't really see play simply due to the fact that it's essentially 19 mana in order to make an effect happen. This card is almost the same thing. It's going to cost at least 9 plus whatever the copy is. It's going to cost at least 9 plus 5. So where do I get that? It's going to cost at least 9 plus 4. 9. It's going to cost at least 9 plus 5. Where do I get the number 5 from? Faceless Manipulator. So you play Faceless Manipulator, you copy this one off, and you have 2 Blood of the Ancient Ones that can go together. Do I think that will be experimented with? Yeah, I think people are going to experiment it with it, for sure. Do I think it's too slow? Yeah, I think it's too slow. Especially due to the fact that once one of these is killed off, the other one is just a 9 mana 9/9, and that's not very good. But, I think that there's going to be some great Trollden moments that come out of this happening to make the Ancient One appear, and I'm definitely interested to see those, but I don't think it's overly a viable card, even in like a control Priest deck. But I've been wrong before. There were a lot of people that thought that Dr. Boom was not so good. It's hard to it's hard to evaluate cards without actually trying them. So of course we're basing these on our experience and on what we think is too slow or too fast. And I think that this one is too slow. And I think that if this gets BGH'd or otherwise removed, that the other one is just a useless 9 mana 9/9. It's basically a really slow draw that doesn't do anything to the board. And because of that, this card is overall not that great. Okay, so this is another neutral, so it's the 6 mana Ancient Harbinger. So it's a 6 mana 4/6, so it's not that great, but at the start of your turn, you put a 10 cost minion from your deck into your hand. So notably, you're going to be playing this in your Cthulhu decks, or any of your decks that are running the Old Gods cards, which are 10 cost, or your Deathwings. But, I don't think that the chances of this surviving when your opponent has 6 or 7 mana are very good. I think that this card is almost always going to get killed, and that the 4 damage that it does is not overly impactful at 6 mana. So overall, I think that this card is just going to get killed off, and it's going to end up just being not good enough. So, meh. It's not that great. Yeah. So in Arena, I don't think you would ever pick this card unless for some odd reason you happen to draft Deathwing, in which case there's some odd synergy there, I guess, if it survives. But again, I don't think the chances of it surviving are that great. So it's not a terrible card, but you might run it in your Cthulhu deck, possibly, if you're really that excited to draw Cthulhu before you get through your deck. But just put a bunch of draw in your deck, dude. Just put a bunch of draw in there and get to it faster. Run some better minions. Yeah, this card is not the greatest. Okay, so 9 mana 5/9 Taunt, Sagoth the Slitherer, and it can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. So basically a 9 mana 5/9 Taunt with Hexproof. So the 9 health is very good. I'm really happy about that. That's not terrible. right? You can compare it to, of course, like Ancient of War, which has 10 health for 2 less mana. But Ancient of War can be hit by things like Polymorph. It can be hit by spells. This one doesn't suffer any of those problems, but it's also a really expensive card to play. So I would have to say that the card, just because due to the fact that it costs 9 mana, is probably not going to be played. I don't think it's a bad card. I just think it's too slow, and the taunt effect that it has in the extreme late game is simply not going to be, I don't think anyway, I don't think it's going to be relevant. The fact that your opponent, I struggle with this one. This is actually probably the card that I've struggled the most with so far. Yes, it's an incredibly expensive card at 9 mana, but it does have 9 health, and 5 attack is somewhat relevant. In this case, your opponent has to trade probably their entire board, if they're a flood deck, into it in order to kill it off, which is not nothing. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, this is going to kill off a zoo deck. This is going to stop something like a hunter in its tracks, as long as they haven't drawn things like Kill Command and things like that. The problem is, I think with the kind of decks that you want to stop with a card like this, I think that the game is pretty much already going to be over before 9 mana. Especially with a deck like Hunter, like I just alluded to. They have things like Kill Command, Quick Shot that can... So, look, I mean, silence is still a thing as well, so it's possible to completely silence this card and then kill it off with spells, because silence is going to remove the taunt, and it's going to remove the hexproof, so then you'll be able to target this with something like a fireball or something to kill it off. Simply due to all the weaknesses of this card and the fact that it costs so much, it might see play in something like a Druid ramp deck as an additional kind of a taunt. I think that's kind of the direction that the new Druid is going to go. Kind of playing these big minions, trying to play them cheaper than what they're for. So something like an Innervate, Sagoth the Slither would be crazy, right? But even with a silence, that's still insane. But outside of a deck like that, I don't think that it's going to see a lot of play once the meta kind of stabilizes. But it's an interesting card, and I'm really glad that Blizzard printed it, because I think that, of course, valuations have been all over the board for this, and it'll be interesting to see how it actually plays out, and then using that information to inform further reviews like this. So science needs to be done, is basically what I'm saying about this card. My intuition tells me it's too slow, but and it's too vulnerable to things like silence, but my hope and love for control decks tells me that this card might be okay in Druid. Let's hope. In Arena, yeah, great card. Pick it up. Definitely a great card. There might be no silence. Your opponent's gonna, by usually around the time that you're gonna draw this card and play it on 9 mana, hopefully your opponent is running out of cards and is gonna, if he has a board, he's gonna have to trade that whole board into it. Otherwise, he's gonna have to get something really effective really soon. And it's kind of a game winner. I think that this card is better than Dr. Boom in Arena, actually. Alright, so let's look at the other 2 Old Gods cards, which have now been unveiled. So this one is a 10 mana 7/5, so it's Yogg Sirhan, Hope's End. Of course, Yogg Sirhan is one of the most popular Old Gods, right up there along with Cthulhu. So I hope that they did this card some justice. So, Battle Cry. Cast a random spell for each spell that you've cast this game. Targets chosen randomly. So with this card, we kind of see the theme that they've been going for with the Old Gods, which is this theme of randomness, right? So you play Cthulhu, and Cthulhu deals missiles randomly to your enemy. Yogg Sirhan casts a random spell for each spell that you've cast this game, and it targets random targets. Right, we saw that 3 mana Warlock damage spell that deals 9 damage to random targets, including your own targets. So the kind of random theme is really cool. I think that it's really awesome. Unfortunately, things like RNG tend to make things a little bit competitively unviable because you want to be able to control the variables in a tournament situation. Yeah, it's possible that you could play a card like Yogg Sirhan and you could just have a blowout. You could get like an insane thing like 3 Pyroblasts to the enemy face, but the chances of that happening are so minuscule that it's not something that you can count on like reliably, right? There's probably a better chance of you getting struck by lightning than that happening. So RNG tends to create some awesome trolling moments, but it tends to be really bad in tournament situations, which is unfortunate. And if you're wanting to climb ladder, then you're really interested in what's competitively viable because you want cards that can enable you to climb quickly and effectively. Yeah, Yogg Sirhan's going to win you some games in an insane blowout, but it's not going to win you a lot of games in that fashion. So here's kind of what I'm going to keep this a little bit short. Otherwise, I'm going to end up talking about this for probably like 30 minutes. In the description below, I'm going to put a link to Kriparian's analysis of Yogg Sirhan, simply due to the fact that I don't want to make a whole video talking about this. So what I'm going to say is there's also a simulator out there, and I've run this simulator a few times. So you can create a board state. You can add minions to your side of the board. You can add minions to your opponent's side of the board. And you can adjust the health totals and things like that. You can adjust the number of spells that you've played in the game. And then you click the Summon Yogg Sirhan button. And it randomly chooses from a pool of spells. And it randomly chooses the targets. And you see what happens. Both times that I ran the simulator, some pretty bad things happened to me, unfortunately. So if you look at this simulator that I ran for my Yogg Sirhan, so I have a Spider Tank and a Silverback Patriarch on my side of the board. The opponent has a Chillwind Yeti and a Defias Bandit. And I've played 10 spells throughout the course of the game. So we're both at 30 health. I also have 4 armor due to one of the cards that was played. So what happened was, first it ganged up my Silverback Patriarch. Wow, that's exciting. Well, of course, that could be a good card, so it could be not a Silverback Patriarch, and then that wouldn't be too terrible. So Wild Growth gave me an excess mana card, and that's not so good. So we're at 10 mana, of course. Mulch destroyed my opponent's Imp, and the opponent got a random minion, so that's really bad. Mortal Coil damaged my Spider Tank for 1. So now my Spider Tank has 3 health, and unfortunately I didn't draw a card off of it. Power Shot on the opponent's Chillwind Yeti and adjacent minions. So it did 2 damage to the Chillwind Yeti, and I think there was a Defias Ringleader there that it killed off. Meh. So kind of meh on that one, but it will allow myself with the Claw ability that was cast at the end here to kill off the Chillwind Yeti, so it's not nothing. Holy Light healed me for 6. That's a thing, but I think I was already at 30, so that's not good. Spellbender was played, so if my opponent is a mage, that could be reasonable. Savagery was played, and it fizzled because Claw was played last, so I gained the 2 attack after Savagery was played, so that's unfortunate. Otherwise, Savagery would have killed off one of my opponent's minions, possibly. So that it's you know, I had a bad experience. Both the other time I played it, it like hellfired my board and killed everything. Unfortunately, and my opponent had some pretty nice minions and that were only partially damaged. On average, it's going to do something that's okay. Oh, I actually missed. So, I actually missed that it Shadow or Death my Yogg Sirhan. So, I didn't even get my Yogg Sirhan. It just happened to be Shadow or the only target that could be Shadow or Death, so it got Shadow or Death. What I'm actually so that's really not good at all. So yeah, this was an absolute disaster of a simulation. But you know, I think that people have kind of worked out the stats, and on average, it seems that the effect is going to be okay to a little bit good, and maybe a little bit. And maybe around like 5% of the time it's going to do something that's really bad. And even smaller percent of the time it's going to do something that's insane and just wins you the game. So you can Pyroblast your opponent for 30, or you can Pyroblast yourself for 30. I mean, those kind of things are just going to happen. It's in the RNG nature of the card. So I'm not crazy about this card simply because I don't like the randomness of it, but I think that I will definitely play with it in some fun decks, and it's going to be a really, really cool card to play with, much like Elise and Golden Monkey is really cool to play with, and getting those random legendaries, right? The problem is that this is a lot less controllable than something like Elise Starseeker, where you play the Golden Monkey, and then you can choose when to play the legendaries and how to use them effectively. Whereas in this case, the game is just randomly choosing targets. And so notably, if your opponent doesn't have any minions on the board and you roll direct damage spells, those direct damage spells are either going to hit your opponent in the face, or more likely they're going to hit one of your minions or yourself in the face. Simply because you have more targets, you have a higher percent chance of getting the negative side of that. And if you play Yogg Sirhan with a similar board state and it rolls something like Blessing of Kings, that's good, because it's more likely to target one of your minions, especially if your opponent has an empty board, and then it'll Blessing of Kings your minion, or Seal of Champions, or whatever the buff spell is. So for buff spells, it's better that you have a board. For damage spells, it's better that you don't have a board and your opponent has a board. But unfortunately, you can't really control which spells are rolled, so therefore the board state seems to not matter, simply due to the fact that you don't know which spells you're going to get. If you could say definitively that you were only going to get buff spells with Yogg Sirhan, you would want yourself to have a huge board when you played it every time. But that could end up screwing you over, because you could just get something terrible could happen, like you play Yogg Sirhan and then you get Twisting Nethered, and then all of your minions are dead, but all of your opponent's minions are dead too, which is maybe good depending on how many minions they had, or it's maybe a disaster. Because of things like that, I think that people are going to experiment with this card in Mage decks. People might experiment with this in a Lock and Load Hunter, just doubling up on the RNG, but I don't think that this card is going to make it to be competitively viable. I think that it's an okay card. I'm glad that they printed it. It definitely fits the old gods randomness effect that they seem to be going for, and it's a really cool card. But it's not broken. It's not a broken card. It's a possibly average to slightly above average card when you look at it. Especially if it gets Shadow or Death, which is terrible. Okay, and finally, Yasharj, Rage Unbound. So 10 mana, 10/10. At the end of your turn, put a minion of your deck into the battlefield. So essentially, this is mini Varian Wrynn. So Varian Wrynn would draw 3 cards and put any minions that you drew directly onto the battlefield. This is a neutral, so it can be used in any class, which also notably makes Varian Wrynn a lot less attractive for a warrior. But in the reason why Varian Wrynn was never played is due to the fact that minions have effects called battle cries, and battle cries are often a significant portion of the reason why we play some really overcosted minions. The fact of the matter is, if you play something like Varian Wrynn and it pulls out your Ysera, you're extremely happy. But if you play Varian Wrynn and it pulls out something like your Cruel Taskmaster, not only are you getting only a 2/2 body on the board, which is not exciting at all, you're not getting that damaging plus attack effect, which you can use for something like to enable an Execute, or you can use it to enable Grimash. So you're losing those valuable effects, and notably you would pull something out like Dr. Boom, and you would have a 7 mana 7/7, and you would have a War Golem on the board for free, which is not bad, but of course it would just get BGH'd, and you wouldn't have those bombs spawn off of it. So Yasharj is the same thing. So it's gonna put a minion into the battlefield, but it's not gonna trigger the battle cry, which makes this card not very good. And especially at 10 mana 10/10, the stats are pretty good. It is vulnerable to, of course, BGH and other forms of removal, but because of the terribleness of pulling random minions out of your deck, and also the fact that it gets you closer to fatigue, which is the kind of deck that you're going to put this into anyway, and you don't really want to draw more into fatigue, which is another big reason why Varian Wrynn never saw any play. I don't think that you're really going to run this card. This is definitely, in my opinion, the most disappointing of the old gods cards. It's too bad. I don't think that you would play this anywhere outside of Arena. I think that in Arena you might pick this one. You're not going to be really happy about it because it's a little bit slow, but if you happen to get it to go off, a 10-mana 10/10 that puts more stats on the board is pretty good. So yeah, that in Arena you might pick this as your late game finisher and be really happy about it. So we've come to the end of this review. I'll be doing another one early next week with some of the cards that were revealed this week by Blizzard and by other streamers. So please stay tuned for that. I'm probably going to go right now and shoot the changes to the standard and classic sets, simply because the news came out this morning, and I really want to get to it and review it right away for you guys. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.